just for funsies, we're going to factor this. There's nothing to factor out of the whole thing. I split in half, so I factor each side. What can I take out here? 7r squared. And I'm left with 6r plus 7. Over here, I already have 6r plus 7. What do you take out if I already have exactly what I want? You take out a positive 1, because you have to take out something. There they are. So my parentheses match. So one of my factors is 6r plus 7. The other one is 7r squared plus 1. That's another. So there we have it. It is D. Okay, any other ones that you came across?
Like 8 and 9. Like, I don't know what I'm doing.
All right.
I wasn't here.
So I know the answer is already circled here for 8. You do any of the graphs. Now listen, every single one of you is going to get every single graphing problem right. Whether you remember how to graph these things or not, it doesn't matter. If it is multiple choice, guys, listen, you can literally plug in 1 or 2 points and get your answer. When I take this and I plug in 0, what comes out? If I plug in 0 for x, what comes out for y? 5. The point 0, 5 better be on my parabola. So if I look at A, 0, 5, yep, that's a point on the parabola, so maybe it's A. B, 0, 5, yep, that's a point on my parabola, maybe it's B. But look at C, 0, 5 is not on this graph. C is not right. D, 0, 5, no, because 0, 1 is where it hits, not at 5. So D is not right. I'm down to 2 choices by plugging in 1 number. Plug in 1 more number and you have your answer. You don't have to remember anything I ever taught you about parabolas. If you can just plug in 2 numbers, you can get your answer. So let's plug in 1. If I plug in 1, that's 1 plus 2 plus 5. That's 8. So another point on my parabola is 1, 8. 1, 8. Not on this one, so A is out. 1, 8. Well, what do you know? It has to be B. If I plug it in 1. I just picked a number to plug in. Always plug in 0 because it's easy. Right? I'm plugging right into this. The x. You're always plugging in for x. And then what comes out is your y. So then when I go to do number 9, pretend you don't see an answer. First of all, you're going to cross out C right away because you remember a little bit of something that I taught you.
Also, it's the one least like the others.
That's true. But C is automatically wrong because it's up like a cup. And doesn't number 9 have to be down like a frown? Right?
Wait, if it's a negative, it's down like a frown.
Right. You follow?
Yes.
So C can't possibly be right. Now, as far as the remaining 3, we'll plug in 0. If you plug in 0 for x, what comes out for y? -7. 0, -7. So I look. Oh, 0, -7 is not on this graph. You're not it. 0, -7. Oh, okay. And D, I can't tell if 0, -7 is on there, so I'm not going to cross it out yet. I'm down to these 2. So then I'm like, all right, let me try one more point. I don't know. Plug in whatever you want.
2.
Well,
-2.
yeah, I might plug in -2. So over here, if I plug in -2, I should get out, looks like -7. And -2 here would be a +3. So plug in a -2 and see what comes out. By the way, the right way to do it is to start off by graphing your vertex, -b over 2a. Plug it back in. See, find who has the vertex there, remember? But you might as well, if it's multiple choice, use it to your advantage. It's so much faster. Just plug in 1 or 2 numbers and you will get your answer. And you have access to a scientific calculator. So as long as you know how to push the buttons correctly, you should be fine. So if I wanted to plug -2 into this equation, right here, you see this one? Oh, hold your thought. Good morning, Miss Sabia. Good. Oh, thank you so much. Bye. Okay, so I'm going to plug this in. -3 times, so put it in parentheses. What am I plugging in? -2. -2, square it. -6 times -2, -7. Ta-da! And -7 is what came out.
Are we allowed to use those calculators?
Yes! If you had been listening to me a minute and a half ago when I said, plus you have access to a scientific calculator. So as long as you know how to push the buttons correctly, you should get the right answer. Oh dear. Any hoosers. So, -2, -7. So that means it's got to be B, because if it had been D, it would have come out to be a +3, and it didn't. So, it's got to be B.
So on number 10,
Mm-hmm.
do you distribute the 4 first, or do you do the x?
I would FOIL the x plus 10 squared first. And then multiply it by 4. And then you subtract the 3 at the end. Now, again, you can work smarter, not harder here. Take a look at what I have. Where are you going to get a 6 in the front? In choice C. Oh, sorry, that's mine. Yeah, it's never going to happen. So C is out. D is out because where's a -4 coming from? I don't know. Nowhere. So D is out. So now I'm pretty much down to these two. And even without totally foiling it together, you can kind of tell that it's going to be A. Why? 10 squared is going to be 100. Times 4 will be 400 minus 3, not plus 3. So it's going to be A, even if you hadn't foiled it all together. So if I'm looking at 11, so right away, C makes no sense and D makes no sense. Where are they getting the negative in the front? I don't know. And then A makes no sense either. Where's a 2x squared going to come from? And where's a 41 going to come from? I don't know. But a 16 and an x squared, it's got to be B. Now, yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, you don't know on the final exam, the multiple choices may be a little bit tougher. I don't know. These I find are way too easy. Like, it's so easy to just rule them out. But maybe that's because I've been doing this 100 years too. I don't know. Go ahead.
On number 12, can you go over like how to find like all that stuff?
Yes. So, how do you find a vertex? Oh, that's right. You do -b over 2a. You gotta know it. -b over 2a. That gets you the x coordinate of the vertex. How do you get the y coordinate? You plug it back in. You take that answer, you plug it back in. So, we had done this last week. -b over 2a would be -6 over -2. So I get a +3 for x. So that means I'm crossing out C, I'm crossing out B, I'm down to A and D. All right? But since they gave me a graph, I already know who's the right one. Doesn't it have to be D because down like a frown? So you don't really have to keep going. What if, let's pretend it was a different problem, and they said, hey, your vertex is at -5, 7, and they asked you for the axis of symmetry. Yeah.
So I get when you do -b over 2a, but that only gets you one number. So how do you know the equal and y and
Right. You take, so when we did it, we got a +3. Now you take that +3 and plug it back in for x and see what comes out for y. So that would be a -9 plus 18 minus 7. That's how we got +2. So it's got to be D again. So go back to this random question that I'm making up. If this is my vertex and they ask you for the axis of symmetry, how do you find it? What'd you say, Kristen? That's it. It's just x equals whatever that number is. That's it.
And y equals whatever that number is.
Well, y does equal 7, but that wouldn't be, that's not your axis of symmetry. Okay. What else can I help you out with?
Ooh, can you do
Wait,
like 14, like the shading?
I know it's negative 2
I will.
over, I mean, negative 2 over, or no, negative.
Negative b over 2a?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then after you, like, how do you figure out which number to plug in, and then what do you do after that?
So, let me make one up. Okay, say you have this quadratic, right? And they ask for the vertex. So you're going to start out by doing negative b over 2a. So that's going to be a negative 8 over 4 times, or 2 times 4 is 8. So I get a negative 1, right? So that means my vertex is at negative 1 comma something. To find that missing number, you have to take negative 1 and plug it in for x and see what you get out. So if I plug in negative 1, negative 1 squared is now positive 1 times 4 is 4. 8 times negative 1 is a negative 8 plus 15. So 4 minus 8 is a negative 4 plus 15 is a positive 11. So that's where my vertex is, negative 1 comma 11. And then my axis of symmetry for this thing would just be x equals negative 1. It's always x equals whatever that number is. And that's it. Would this be up like a cup or down like a frown? This up like a cup. Would it be wide, narrow, or neither? Narrow.
If it was negative, it goes down,
Mm-hmm.
and then it goes up.
Huh?
They all say it's up, though.
Yeah. It's this number, not this one. This one, yeah, this has nothing to do with it. It's this one. If that number is positive, it's up like a cup. The bigger that number is, the more narrow it is. If that number is a fraction that's less than 1, so like 1/2, 1/3, 1/9, 2/5, it's going to be wide. And the closer it is to 0, the wider it's going to be. So who's wider, 1/2 or 1/4? 1/4, because it's closer to 0. The smaller the number gets, the wider it is. The bigger the number gets, the more narrow it is.
What's the discriminant?
Oh!
Who else wants to do 27, 29, and 30?
Well, there's the discriminant right there. So everybody made sure that they knew the quadratic formula over the weekend, right? Right? The discriminant is just the highlighted portion in orange there, b squared minus 4ac. And remember what its solutions mean. If it's positive, that means there are 2 real solutions. If it's negative, that means that there are no real solutions, which is the same thing as having 2 imaginary solutions. And 0 is 1 real solution. Oh, I just thought of an interesting way to remember this. If you're a positive person, you have 2 real friends. If you're a negative person, you have no real friends, which is the same thing as having 2 imaginary friends.
But
If you're just kind of neutral, then maybe you get one friend that's, you got one friend. Positive person, 2. I like that. Oh, and then what do you want to do? 27?
What? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
7? I'm sorry.
Well, I bet you can do it now that we just recapped what the discriminant is and what their answers mean.
Did you already do 29?
Are you confused at how to
I have done 29. I mean, this is your guys' day, though. I'll do whatever you want.
Can you focus on tentative quadratic formula? Because I
Can I do what?
plug in something to quadratic.
Oh, sure. So let's say you were going to do, let's say you want to do number 25. Or, let's make it more interesting. Maybe we're going to do, all right. So, 25, you've got,
What does it mean to find all zeros?
that means solve it. So, 2x squared plus x minus 1. You have 4 ways to solve a quadratic. Solve by square rooting. You can't do that here because b isn't 0. You can try and factor this with your t's. Since a isn't 1, you got to use your t's. You can try that. You can do completing the square. I would not recommend. Or you can do quadratic formula. So, let's do quadratic formula. Remember, that's A, that's B, that's C. Make sure it's in standard form before you start. You have to know the quadratic formula. If you don't know it by now, I don't know what to tell you. You better learn it before tomorrow. There it is. Make sure you know it. You might as well start off by finding the discriminant, because if I get 0 as an answer, that means that there is no solution. I kind of get to stop. So, b squared minus 4ac.
81 minus 18.
I'm doing 25. So it'd be 1 squared, which is 1, minus 4 times 2 times negative 1. Right?
Plus 8. 1 plus 8.
Yes. So I get 9. So that means I'm going to have 2 answers. I have to keep going. I don't get to stop because it's negative. So now let's plug it in. So negative b would be negative 1 plus minus square root of, I already did b squared minus 4ac, the answer was 9. All over 2 times a would be a 4. I know the square root of 9 is 3, so it's negative 1 plus minus 3 all over 4. You don't stop there, though. You do it. Negative 1 plus 3 is 2, and 2 over 4 is 1/2. Right? 2 over 4. Then I do negative 1 minus 3, and I get negative 4 over 4, which is negative 1. There's my 2 answers.
It's not multiple choice. Not on there. Oh, wait. 25.
Yeah, it's choice D. Do you still want me to do 27?
Yes.
Okay, so 27, they're just asking for the discriminant and what the solution types are. So, remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. What do you have to do first on 27, people?
Minus 4.
Yes, it has to be in standard form before you begin. Has to be. 9m squared minus 9m minus the 4 over would leave me with a plus 6. It is not in standard form until it's all in order with your exponents, right? And the whole thing has to equal 0. All right, now I can do b squared minus 4ac.
Wait, what'd you do? Oh, added it to the other side.
Minus, but yes. b squared minus 4ac. Let's do it. Negative 9 squared minus 4 times 9 times 6. Negative 9 squared is 81. And then 4 times 9 times 6 is 216. So minus 216. So 81 minus 216 is negative 135. So how many solutions will this thing have?
No real solution.
No real solutions. If you're a negative person, you have no friends. Or you have two imaginary friends. Same thing. So there it is, choice A. Okay. What else?
Like the height and like the maximum, like the one when it hits the ground, those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm gonna make up a new one. Okay, everybody. Let's say this is your equation. So this is the same style question as 29, 30, and 31, but we've already done them. So we'll do this one. And I'm going to ask you these random questions. There's really only so many questions that I could ask about this thing. You're going to have some ball, it's being thrown up in the air, blah, 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 blah. I can ask you, how high does the ball ever go? I can ask you, how long does it take for the ball to get as high as it ever goes? I could ask you how long it takes for the ball to hit the ground. Or some version of that. So let's answer them all. So let's do, I don't know. How high will the ball go? If it helps you to kind of sketch the scenario, go ahead. There will be a little paragraph that describes that you're going to throw a ball starting from a height of 4 feet, and you're going to throw it. So let's pretend you throw a ball. When it leaves your hand, it's already 4 feet up. You're going to throw the ball, and it's going to look something like that. So, where does the ball reach its highest height? Yes. Called the vertex. Oh. So if I just find the vertex of this, that's a good start. Let's see. Negative 40 over negative 32 gets me 1.25. Does that mean that the highest the ball will ever go is 1.25? Let's assume we're in feet. No. What is that? That's how long it takes to get there.
Oh, and then you have to plug back in to get
Right. So this is seconds. And now I'll take that number of seconds and I'll plug it back in and see how high it actually does go. Remember, you have a calculator at your disposal, so I hope you use it. $29. Let's assume we're in feet. Okay, so the highest this ball will ever go is 29 feet. So another question I might ask you is, how long does it take for the ball to reach max height? How would I find the answer to that?
Just leave it.
Didn't you just find the time right there? You literally already have the answer. Both of these questions are answered by the vertex. If you have both coordinates of the vertex, this is the x coordinate of the vertex, this is the y coordinate of the vertex. The only question that I could ask you that's not solved by finding the vertex is how long will it take for the ball to hit the ground?
Wouldn't it be just 2.50?
So, it would have been if the ball had started on the ground. So say if it was like a soccer ball and I kicked it, because then this would be exactly halfway. The problem is, when it was at time 0, when it left my hand, it wasn't on the ground. So this isn't perfectly symmetrical. I can approximate, right? It took 1.25 seconds to get here. It's going to take 1.25 seconds for it to match over here. So it's going to be a tiny bit bigger than 1.25 seconds. So if it were multiple choice and there was only one number that was a little bit more than 1.25, that would probably be my answer. But what if there's two numbers that are a little bit more? There needs to be a way for you to find this. But do you get why? If it had started on the ground and went back to the ground, so you kicked the ball, then yes, I could just take my middle and double it. But this time it didn't work out that way because it didn't start on the ground. So, anybody know what to do here? What will the height of the ball be when it hits the ground? 0. So you put a 0 in for h, and then you just solve that quadratic. Miss Sabia, how do you solve a quadratic? Oh, I don't know. You only have 4 ways to do it. You can do your t's. You can always try and factor. First thing I noticed is I can take a 4 out of all of these. Furthermore, I'm going to take out a -4 because I don't like my first term to be negative. So divide everybody by a -4. You can try and factor this, but I don't think it factors. So now I'm going to have to do quadratic formula or completing the square. I would not complete the square either because if a isn't 1, it's a nightmare. So I would do quad formula. Let's start off with finding the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. Oh dear. So b squared minus 4ac, that would be 100 minus 4 times -1. That would be 100 plus 16. 116. So yes, I can take the square root of that. There are 2 solutions to this. Let's find them. X equals -b, so positive 10, plus or minus the square root of, my discriminant is 116, all over 2a. A is 4, so that would be an 8. So I will ask Mr. Calculator for some help. 10 plus the square root of 116 gets me 20.77. I have to divide that by 8. So one answer is 2.59. Actually, that would be 2.60 if I round correctly. The other one, 10 minus the square root of 116 divided by 8. Well, that gets me negative 0.1. What do I do with that answer? I have to throw it away because I can't have a negative time, so see you later, alligator. Okay. Could I do what? 33 you want?
Yeah, or 34. Or both.
Let's do both. These are my faves. 33 is a multiplication problem, right? I'm multiplying those two. If you remember, there was only 2 steps to these. Factor whatever you can, cancel, I guess 3 steps, and then write your answer. So, you're just going to look at each thing all by itself. 1, there's nothing to do there. Can I factor anything here? 8x cubed minus 8x squared. Take out an 8x squared, and what's left behind? X minus 1. Do you agree?
Wait, sis. 1 second, hold up. Can't you just cancel the negative 8x squared with the 8x squared?
No, because he's in a binomial.
They're married.
They're married. The only thing you can do is factor out a common factor.
You can do 8x squared.
Now that I have factored out an 8x squared, now I can cancel the single 8x squared with the single 8x squared. That's fine. I have nothing else that will cancel, so I'm done. X minus 1 over 7x. Finished. Choice C. 34 is a little bit more complicated because it's a division problem. But, do you remember what the only thing is I have to do? Yeah, keep, change, flip, and then it becomes a multiplication problem. But you have to take the time to rewrite it. So the first fraction stays as it is. 7 over 6n squared minus 12n. Change to multiplication, and then you flip this one over. 24n minus 48 all over 8. Now it's the same problem that I just did, and I factor each piece by itself. 7, nothing to do. 24n minus 48, what could I do there? Take out a 24. Great idea. N minus 2. Down here, what can I take out? 6n, and I'm left with n minus 2. And that's just an 8. N minus 2's go. I can reduce these two with each other.
Wait, can you reduce like 6 and 24 back to
Yeah, let's do that because it's, yeah, 6 goes into 24 4 times. 6 goes into 6 once, so it's gone. And now I can do 4 and 8. 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 twice. I think I'm done. So then I write whatever I have left. Just make sure you don't lose it. I have 7 left up top, and then 2n on the bottom. Choice D. Oh boy.
like 43?
So 43 and 44 are 2 division problems. You can do synthetic or long division. It's your choice. As long, you can do synthetic as long as you have, whatever you're dividing by has to be a variable and then plus minus some number. If it was something like divide by 3x minus 5, you have to do long division with that. If there's a coefficient in front of the x, you have to do long division. If it's not, you can do synthetic. It's up to you. If you are good at long division, you can always do long division. It doesn't matter. Even if it tells you divide using synthetic division, I'm never going to know. If it tells you to solve by completing the square, and you don't remember how to complete the square, but you know quadratic formula, do quadratic formula. I'm never going to know. You just have to get the right choice, A, B, C, or D. How you get there, it doesn't matter to me. Just don't cheat. But you don't have to listen to the directions. If you don't want to solve it the way they're telling you to, ignore them. You do you. If you are an expert... huh? No, but what you could do, it's not quite as neat, but you can pick a number for x and actually do the math. So let's pretend that x were 1. Or actually, let's make our lives easier. Let's pretend it was 0. Let's say x is 0. Then if I plug it in here, I get negative 16 divided by negative 2. I get out a positive 8. If I plug 0 into all of these, I better still get out a positive 8. So if I plug 0 into this, watch. 0, 0. Okay, so I get 6 minus 0 minus 2 is negative 2. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. 6 minus negative 2 is still positive 8. If you plug it into these other ones, it probably isn't. If I plug in 0, I get 3 plus 4.5. That's not 8. I'd get 9 plus a half. That's not it. I'd get 8 plus 3. So that is one other little slick trick move that you could do.
So for 44, you do negative 75.
Oh, well, if you plug in 0. So if you plug in 0 for n, that means you're going to do negative 75 divided by negative 10. So your answer is a positive 7.5. So now you just plug 0 into all of these and see who comes out to also be a positive 7.5. So, I mean, that's one option. Another option is knowing how to do it. So we did it out last week, long division.
How can you tell when it's long division in that other way?
You have to have a number in front of this one. Like there has to be a number in front of your variable.
To be the easier way?
No, that means you have to do long division. If it's just a variable and then plus or minus some number, you can do long division or synthetic. Remember with synthetic, if we just look at our example from last week, you have to make sure that it's in standard form. You write down all the coefficients. And then remember, you're plugging in the opposite of what you see there. So you're actually going to plug in a positive 2. Get all your answers. Okay, what else? Oh, yeah. So if you go back to something like number what is it you want to practice? Quadratic or completing the square, or both?
Or completing this one is fine.
Well, let's go back to number 20. So number 20, you're supposed to solve this thing, right? But you wouldn't do 20 like that. I'm going to make one up because none of these seem to make sense with that. So let's say you had a quadratic and it was, oh, I don't know. Hi. Oh, thanks. Haley W. There you are. Okay. All right. So you have this quadratic. You want to, by the way, when you solve a quadratic, what is it you're really finding? Finding what?
X,
What about it? What do you mean the x?
the value of X,
The value of x when?
Y equals 0.
Yes. In other words, you're finding where this graph crosses the x-axis. Remember that? That's what you are doing when you solve a quadratic. You're finding the two places where this thing crosses the x-axis. So when they say find the zeros, find the x-intercepts, find the solution, it's all the same thing. So if I were going to do this one, I can't factor it. There are no factors of negative 50 that have to be a positive 10. Are there? I don't think so. So I can't factor it. So one other option that I have is completing the square. First of all, I'm going to replace y with a 0, and I put the 0 over on the side because that's how I roll. Then, remember you got to move c to the other side? Remember? You add 50 to the other side. And then what do? Take half of b and square it. So half of 10 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. So you add 25 to both sides. So now on the right, I have 75. On the left, what happens? This is what is called a perfect square trinomial. There are factors of 25 that adds to be 10. And it's 5 and 5. It's always the same two. So I write x plus 5 squared. You're just factoring this side. Factors of 25 that have to be 10. 5 and 5. So instead of writing x plus 5 times x plus 5, we just write x plus 5 squared. But now, wow, you guys did a lot of studying this weekend. Oh boy.
Wouldn't it just be x squared plus 25 equals 75, and then you minus the 25, so x squared equals 50?
From here, I would square root both sides. And I get x plus 5 equals whatever the square root of 75 is.
Why did you add 15 and 25 to this?
That's that magic number. Remember, you take half of b and you square it. You add to both sides. Anyway, I have the simplified square root of 75, 25, and 5 go in. 25 and 3. So it's positive negative 5 root 3. And all I have to do is minus the 5 over. Wow. Oh dear. Negative 5 plus minus 5 root 3. There's my answers. Again, you don't like completing the square? Don't do it. Do quadratic formula instead. You got to know one of the two, though, because they're the only two that work for everything. And really, you have to know quadratic formula. Because although you can do completing the square with any quadratic, it becomes a huge nightmare if b is odd and if a isn't 1. So if you're only going to know one of them, you better know quadratic formula. You'll get the same exact answer as long as you do quadratic formula correctly. Oh boy. What else could I do for you? Nobody's asked me, even from last week, nothing from 53 to the end.
Yeah, can you do that?
Of course I can. Nobody asked me about, wow, 36 to 42, 45 to 49. Wowee. All right. Well, let's just do solving a quadratic one. A radical one. Anybody have a preference? 53 to 60?
57.
57, I heard. Okay. So, 57. If you have a square root, step 1 is to
Plus 3.
add 3 to the other side. Thank you. So, I'm going to rewrite it over here. I got square root of 99r plus 1 minus 3 equals 7. So, here's my problem. So, first thing you need to do is get the square root by itself. So you should add 3 to both sides.
And then do you square it?
Yep. Once the square root is by itself, to undo a square root, you square both sides.
Which just cancels the.
Mm-hmm. So that, a square root and a square just cancel each other out.
No. And then -1
Minus 1. R does equal 1. Yep. Sure. You can always check your answer. You should, because it could come up extraneous. Take 1, pop it back in. 99 times 1 plus 1 is 100. Square root of 100 is 10. Is 10 minus 3, 7? Yep. I know I have the right answer.